The soil beneath your feet is bone dry, a dusty gray that crumbles into powder at the slightest touch, yet the tomato vines climbing toward the sun are heavy with fruit, their leaves a deep, impossible emerald green. In a world where we've been taught that life requires constant intervention and expensive infrastructure, this garden is a silent rebellion. It hasn't been watered by a human hand in 3 months. We are conditioned to believe that growth is a result of struggle, a battle against the elements that requires pumps, timers, and a rising monthly utility bill. But while we've been busy engineering complex solutions to thirst, we've overlooked a physical law that has been quietly moving oceans and feeding ancient forests for millennia. This isn't just about a cheaper way to grow vegetables, it's about a fundamental misunderstanding of how water actually wants to move. Take a look at the modern garden. We spray water from above, watching most of it evaporate before it touches the soil, or we install drip lines that eventually clog with mineral deposits and fail when the power blinks out. It's a fragile system built on the assumption that we must be the masters of the flow. But what if the secret to a self-sustaining ecosystem wasn't more technology, but less? What if the most powerful pump in the world didn't have a single moving part? But here, where it gets interesting. Deep in the Australian outback, a gardener named Colin Austin began experimenting with a concept that seemed to defy the logic of the desert. He noticed that even in the height of a drought, certain patches of earth remained moist just inches below the surface. He wasn't looking at a hidden spring or a leaking pipe. He was looking at a wicking bed, a localized, self-regulating aquifer that uses the Earth's own mechanics to defy gravity. To understand why this works, you have to forget everything you know about how a plant drinks. We think of roots as straws, but they are actually sophisticated sensors. When you pour water on top of the soil, you're essentially drowning those sensors, forcing them to gasp for air in a muddy slurry. Then, as the sun bakes the surface, the moisture vanishes, leaving the roots in a state of constant shock. It's a cycle of feast and famine that stresses the plant and wastes nearly 70% of the water used. That's not the full story, though. The real magic happens through a phenomenon called capillary action. It's the same force that draws ink up into a fountain pen or pulls coffee into the corner of a sugar cube. In the soil, water molecules are attracted to the surfaces of sand and organic matter. They don't just sit there, they climb. By creating a reservoir of water underneath the soil, we can tap into this vertical migration. The water doesn't wait for us to pour it. It rises naturally, meeting the roots exactly where they are, in the precise volume they need. Think about the implications for a moment. Instead of a surface that is constantly wet and prone to weeds and fungus, the top layer of your garden remains dry and mulch-like. Beneath that, however, is a consistent, humid microclimate. The plants are no longer waiting for the next rain or the next turn of the faucet. They are in control of their own hydration. And this changes everything. Building this system doesn't require a degree in engineering or a massive bank account. In fact, you can do it with $20 and a trip to a hardware store. You start with a waterproof container. This could be a repurposed stock tank, a lined wooden crate, or even a simple plastic bin. At the bottom, you create a water bridge. This is usually a layer of gravel or specialized recycled plastic cells that hold a massive volume of water while supporting the weight of the soil above. But there's a catch. If you just put soil on top of water, you get a swamp. To make it a system, you need a barrier, a simple piece of geotextile fabric that allows the moisture to wick up while preventing the soil from falling down into the reservoir and turning into an anaerobic mess. A single vertical pipe allows you to fill the reservoir from the top, and a small overflow hole on the side ensures that the water level never rises high enough to rot the roots. Once it's built, the maintenance drops to near zero. You fill the pipe once every few weeks, or in some climates, once every few months, and walk away. There are no batteries to replace, no sensors to calibrate, and no worries about a heatwave killing your harvest while you're on vacation. It's a closed-loop system that mimics the way moisture is held deep in the earth after a heavy rain. So why isn't every farm in the world using this? The answer is as much about economics as it is about habit. Our global agricultural system is built on throughput, the constant movement of inputs like chemical fertilizers and pressurized water. Passive systems like wicking beds are difficult to monetize because once they are installed, they don't require you to buy anything else. They favor the individual over the industry. In a world obsessed with the smart and the connected, a pile of rocks and a piece of fabric feels almost too simple to be revolutionary. Yet when you scale this up, the results are staggering. Imagine urban rooftops transformed into lush, productive farms that require no pumps. Imagine community gardens in drought-stricken regions that thrive on a fraction of the water used by traditional methods. This isn't a theoretical dream. It's a proven mechanical reality that is already being used to green some of the harshest environments on the planet. But here is the most profound realization. When we stop trying to force the environment to adapt to our schedules, and instead align our designs with the way physics already works, the work of gardening disappears. We aren't just growing food, we are creating a partnership with the natural world. The tension between the dry surface and the hidden reservoir creates a perfect balance, a literal middle ground, where life flourishes without our constant anxiety. The next time you see a withered plant or a skyrocketing water bill, ask yourself if we've been looking at the problem from the wrong direction. The water is already there, ready to rise. We just have to give it a path. If you could build a system today that would still be feeding you 5 years from now without a single cent of electricity, would you keep doing things the old way? What else is nature waiting to do for us if we only stop getting in the way? The silence of a wicking garden is perhaps its most unsettling feature. In a traditional setup, you hear the hum of a pump, the hiss of a leaky hose, or the rhythmic clicking of a timer. Here there is nothing but the sound of growth. We have become so accustomed to the noise of maintenance that we mistake it for productivity, but true efficiency is silent. When you scale this system from a single backyard bin to a full-scale homestead, the logic doesn't just hold up, it accelerates. By connecting multiple beds to a single central reservoir, you create a grid of hydration. If one area of the garden is under heavy sun and drinking faster, it pulls more from the shared source through that same relentless capillary pull. It is a decentralized water economy where the plants themselves dictate the distribution. But there's a hidden layer to this story that most people miss. By watering from below, you aren't just saving water, you are protecting the soil's biology. When you top water, the impact of the droplets compacts the earth, creating a hard crust that suffocates beneficial microbes. Wicking beds keep the soil structure open and fluffy. This creates a paradise for earthworms and mycelium, the underground fungal networks that act as the internet of the plant world. You aren't just building a watering system, you're building a living, breathing basement for your ecosystem. And this changes everything about how we view waste. In a standard garden, any fertilizer you add is eventually washed away by rain or overwatering, ending up in the groundwater. In this closed-loop reservoir, those nutrients stay trapped. They cycle from the water to the roots, back into the soil, and back into the plant. It is a near-perfect recycling machine. The $20 you spent on gravel and plastic pays a dividend not just in water savings, but in the sheer density of the nutrition in your food. That's not the full story, though. The real tension lies in our obsession with control. We feel like better gardeners when we are out there with a hose every evening. It feels like work. But the wicking system asks us to step back and trust a physical law that has existed since the first plants crawled onto land. It forces us to admit that a piece of fabric and a pile of stones might be smarter than our most expensive Wi-Fi-connected irrigation gadgets. If we can solve the most fundamental challenge of agriculture, the consistent delivery of water, with nothing more than gravity and surface tension, what other complex problems are we overcomplicating? The dry, dusty surface of the wicking bed is a mask. Beneath it lies a reservoir of potential that stays cool while the world burns, and stays wet while the clouds vanish. The system isn't just running for years without you. It's waiting for you to realize that the best solutions aren't built there uncovered. We've spent centuries trying to conquer the Earth's cycles. Perhaps it's time we started wicking from them instead. What other invisible forces are you currently fighting against when you could be riding them? The true test of any system isn't how it performs on a sunny afternoon, it's how it survives when the world turns hostile. In a standard garden, a 3-day heat wave is a death sentence. The soil temperature spikes, the moisture evaporates, and the plants enter a state of permanent wilting, point a physiological shutdown from which many never recover. But inside the wicking bed, the physics of evaporation actually work in your favor. As the sun beats down on the dry surface mulch, it creates a thermal barrier. The water reservoir, buried deep beneath the soil and shielded by the Earth's mass, stays significantly cooler than the ambient air. This temperature differential acts like a natural air conditioning unit for the root zone. While your neighbor's plants are struggling to breathe, yours are sitting in a cool, humid basement, pulling moisture at a rate perfectly calibrated to the intensity of the sun. But here, where it gets interesting. This stability allows you to grow thirstier crops in environments where they usually fail. Imagine harvesting crisp, water-heavy cucumbers or massive watermelons in the middle of a high-desert drought. You aren't fighting the climate anymore, you're bypassing it. You've created a localized microaquifer that doesn't care if the rain stops falling for a month. And this changes everything for the lazy gardener. The transition from a high-maintenance hobby to a passive food source is a shift in mindset. We've been told that to get something out, you have to put constant effort in. But this $20 system proves that the most resilient designs are those that require the least human ego. Once the reservoir is set, the only work left is the harvest. The system doesn't need your permission to succeed. It only needs you to stay out of its way. That's not the full story, though. Scaling this isn't just about bigger boxes, it's about a smarter landscape. You can build these systems into the very foundations of a home, or use them to reclaim dead spaces like concrete balconies or contaminated urban lots where you can't plant directly into the ground. By separating the growing medium from the earth below, you eliminate the risk of soil-borne toxins while maintaining the benefits of a deep earth water cycle. We often think of sustainability as a sacrifice doing more with less, but wicking beds suggest that sustainability is actually an upgrade. It's doing better with less. It's a realization that our obsession with active technology has blinded us to the raw power of passive physics. The $20 you spend today isn't just buying a watering system. It's buying back your time and securing your autonomy against an increasingly unpredictable climate. The dry garden thriving in the dust isn't a miracle. It's a message. It's telling us that the earth has always had the mechanisms to sustain life, even in the harshest conditions. We just had to stop trying to be the rain and start being the reservoir. The most sophisticated technology in your garden isn't the one that plugs into the wall. It's the one that's been waiting under your feet all along. How much of your daily life is spent managing systems that were designed to fail, when a passive alternative is sitting right in front of you? The most profound shift in a wicking system isn't the water you save, but the biology you gain. In a traditional garden, every time you water from the top, you create a kill zone on the surface, a cycle of crusting and cracking that destroys the delicate mycelial networks and drives earthworms deeper into the earth to escape the heat. But because a wicking bed stays dry on top and consistently moist below, it becomes a permanent sanctuary for the invisible architects of the soil. You aren't just growing plants, you are hosting a subterranean civilization. The worms stay near the root zone year-round, constantly aerating the soil and depositing nutrient-rich castings exactly where the plants can use them. The fungal hyphae, which usually dry out and die in surface-water dirt, thrive in the stable humidity of the wicking reservoir. This creates a biological internet that allows plants to trade nutrients and even signal each other about pest attacks. But here, where it gets interesting. Because this system is so stable, you can actually overplant. In a normal garden, crowding leads to competition for water and eventually failure. In a wicking bed, you can pack plants much tighter together. This creates a living mulch, where the leaves of one plant shade the soil for another, further reducing evaporation and creating a cooling canopy. You are essentially building a high-density, vertical jungle in a space no larger than a bathtub. And this changes everything for the urban dweller. We often think of food security as something that happens on a 1,000-acre farm, but with $20 and a balcony, that narrative shifts. You can grow the equivalent of a small farm's worth of greens and roots in a handful of wicking bins. They don't leak, they don't smell, and they don't require you to be home at 6:00 p.m. to turn on the tap. It is the democratization of the harvest, moved from the countryside into the heart of the city. That's not the full story, though. The scalability of this passive technology is only limited by our imagination. Large-scale agricultural projects in the Middle East and Australia are now experimenting with wicking fields, massive underground reservoirs that can turn salt-crusted plains back into fertile land. By preventing surface evaporation, they stop the rise of salt to the surface, effectively healing the soil from the inside out. We have spent decades trying to fix the world with more energy, more chemicals, and more complexity. Yet the wicking bed stands as a silent witness to a different path. It suggests that the most powerful solutions are the ones that require the least of us. It's a $20 investment in a future where we don't have to work against the sun. To survive, we just have to understand how to store its gifts. The dry, thriving garden isn't just an anomaly, it's a blueprint. It's a reminder that even when the rains stop and the power fails, the laws of physics remain. The water is still there, tucked away, waiting for a wick to find it. The system is already running. The only question is whether you're ready to let go of the hose and let the earth take over. If a simple physical law can feed you for years with no maintenance, what other impossible problems are you trying to solve with effort instead of design? What's stopping you from building your first reservoir today? Dust on the surface of a wicking bed is a clever disguise. To the untrained eye, the garden looks abandoned, parched under a relentless sun that should have turned these plants into brittle straw weeks ago. Yet beneath that bone-dry crust lies a silent, $20 revolution that bypasses the fragility of our modern infrastructure. This isn't just a gardening hack. It is a masterclass in passive engineering that proves the most resilient systems are the ones that don't need us to survive. We have been conditioned to believe that life requires a constant, high-energy pulse electricity to move water, sensors to monitor moisture, and a human schedule to keep it all from collapsing. But while we've been busy building smart systems that fail the moment the Wi-Fi drops or the power grid flickers, the wicking bed has been quietly using the unchanging laws of physics to do the work for free. It relies on capillary action, the same molecular tension that pulls water hundreds of feet up into the canopy of a redwood tree to create a self-regulating underground sea. But here, where it gets interesting. By moving the water reservoir beneath the soil, you eliminate the single greatest enemy of the modern grower, evaporation. In a traditional garden, you are caught in a losing battle against the atmosphere, watching your expensive utility water vanish into thin air before the roots can even taste it. In this closed-loop system, the water has nowhere to go but up into the plant. It is a 100% efficient delivery mechanism that operates in total silence, regardless of whether you are there to witness it or not. That's not the full story, though. The real tension isn't in the technology, it's in our ego. We find it difficult to trust a system that doesn't require our labor. We've been taught that a thriving harvest is a trophy of our hard work, yet the wicking bed thrives specifically because we stepped out of the way. It challenges the economic narrative that says we must constantly buy inputs to see outputs. Once those $20 materials are in place, the market loses its grip on your food supply. And this changes everything.